Rocha. We're doing the shir for the refuah of Yehudit Pesa Bat Sarah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'suk b'divrei Torah. Barevna Adonai Eloheinu divrei Toratcha b'finu b'fiyamcha beit Yisrael. V'niyeh anachnu v'tzeitzeinu v'tzeitzeimcha beit Yisrael. Kulanu yodea shemecha v'lemdei Toratecha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai l'mei Torah le'amo Yisrael.
Amen.
Amen.
Blessed art you, Adonai, God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of your Torah. Blessed and please, Hashem, our God, sweeten the words of your Torah in our mouth and the mouth of your people, the family of Israel. May we and our offspring and the offspring of your people, the house of Israel, all of us know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed art you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to his people, Israel.
Amen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachavanu mikol hamim v'noten lanu Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notei Torah.
Amen.
Blessed art you, Adonai, God, King of the universe, who selected us from all the peoples and gave us his Torah. Blessed art you, Adonai, giver of his Torah. Okay, just want to learn one or two halachos quickly. Now that we've learned the Maisa. And if ever you own a bar, you know to play the music a little bit faster so people can drink more. All right, so now what we're learning is there's halachas of tefillah chaderech and issues of vacation. So it seems that some people are going away. So obviously when you travel on a journey, you do tefillah chaderech, which means the prayer on the way. And it can be found in most sidurim. It's a prayer that we basically say when we arrive and return safely on our travels, and we beseech Hashem for protection and success. So you do it going to a location and return. So just in terms of what sort of journey requires tefillah taderech, one may say that tefillah, if one will go on a journey that is longer than a parsa, which is about 4 kilometers beyond the city. For these purposes, beyond the city means about 35 meters past the last house of the city. So guys, don't misunderstand and say 4 kilometers on your journey. It means outside of the city outskirts, there's a further 4 kilometers beyond. Okay? And then after 4 kilometers, you measure about 35 meters. So when you don't see any buildings and electricity, you know you're there. Oh, wait, that's South Africa. The reason is because that when one is in a city, there's less risk and vulnerability. Nobody's been to Joburg. What are they talking about? But once he leaves the city, there's more risk and worry. Therefore, we said after one has left the last house of the city plus 35 meters. One should try and say it within the first kilometer outside the city from which one departed. But if he didn't, one may say it any time during the journey before arriving close to the destination. It makes no difference if one walks, rides, drives, flies, or sails. When does one say it? You should only say it when you actually start traveling. If one catches an aeroplane, one should say it once the aeroplane is driving fast on the runway or it's taking off. As mentioned, that's ideal. If you didn't do it then, one should still say it during the flight. Okay, one tefillah taderech works for the whole of the day. The next day, one must say a new tefillah taderech. So if you're flying to a location and back on the same day for a business trip, you're covered. Okay. I think we've hit a couple of halachas there. Sorry, Gav, what were you going to say?
I think in South Africa, you must say tefillah taderech when you leave the city and when you come back.
Yeah, I think in South Africa, you should bench Goemo every day that you're still alive.
100%.
Speaking of which, I remember we were held up at gunpoint, and
Yes.
and then there was another car accident that Hashem averted from us. I think we did quite a few sessions together, benching Goimo, and eventually the rabbi said maybe we needed a bit of a break from each other. Okay, just teasing. So, all right, let's get to the shir. Now, what we're going to do is we're covering a new topic at which we held, which we touched on a couple of days ago. Now, the reason why I want to just go through this very, very quickly is Arthur very kindly attended the shir. I'm sure he's recording this. He only had a couple of hours sleep, and yet he attended, which Arthur Shkayach. You get the reward for Lishma, much appreciated, seriously, for attending.
Yeah,
So what
go.
we're going to do in that merit
Uh,
is I'm just going to fly through it just to repeat the concepts. Now, does anybody remember from Wednesday, because Friday we took a break, Rabbi Daniel Brady, which was lovely to see him, gave the shir. Does anybody remember the essence of what we discussed, or could we all do with a bit of review? If Kevin or Arthur, if Kevin remembers, Kevin,
yeah.
if you remember, or Gavin remembers, feel free to volunteer what you remember.
Okay.
What do you remember?
Just give us like one word, and then to help us.
Okay, what's the difference of practically whether a person becomes muad or a animal becomes muad?
Okay.
3 times.
All right, Kevin, go for it.
3 times. That's I mean, on a basic level, 3 times. Then
No, we're asking the difference between that 3 times, whether it's a person or animal, and what do we mean by it? So
the difference. The difference.
I
Okay.
think we can all do with review. Okay, that being said, let's get straight into it. All right. Now I'm going to do this here in a bit of different way I did it before, mate. I'm going to just go for it as a conversation more, and then not put a lot of detail, just to give you guys a bit of a vibe and a feel for this. All right. So where are we on? We're on 24a2. The Gemara presents a new inquiry. They inquired, are the 3 days that the Mishnah mentions needed in order to make the ox muad, or in order to make a person muad who owns the ox? Okay. So what we're saying is here, firstly, the premise of this is it's going according to Rabbi Yehuda. How do we know that this inquiry in the Mishnah is going to Rabbi Yehuda? Again, because it's talking about 3 separate days in order for the animal to become muad. So we're saying what constitutes muad? The definition of muad means 2 things. That the animal is a habitual damager. It's a habitual gora. And when we say gora, we mean it could be biting, it could be kicking, it could be doing any sort of destructive activity on a continual basis. If the animal is not safe around people and other animals, and it's habitual in nature, it's known as muad. The argument with Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is what it takes for an animal to become muad. So the very fact that it mentions in this inquiry does it take 3 separate days means it's going according to Rabbi Yehuda. Okay? So we're saying, listen, there's a practical difference here. The word muad also means forewarned. So why do we make an animal forewarned? Because we firstly have mercy on the person, because we always, as Arthur said very cleverly in the beginning of this year, we try always to find a balance between both parties. Why? The person that's been damaged needs financial restitution, but the person that does the damaging also doesn't need to be broke over the situation. So we always try and make both people have some sort of a compromise. You know the definition of a compromise where both people are unhappy.
It's called marriage.
Let's call marriage.
Yeah.
So the thing of it is that the Gemara wants to find a resolution by both the damager and the damaged party doing what's fair to both parties. So what the Gemara is saying like this, Kev, is it saying, listen, for the first 3 incidents, you didn't know your animal was a habitual gora. How do we know this? The very fact that you got the concept of tam or tame animal means that animals naturally are reasonable. You can deal with them. But when this animal becomes rogue and crazy, at that point, you have to take special care. And because you've been warned after a number of times, at that particular point, it's very hazardous for you to keep the animal. Now, Rav Yehuda's, it's going according to Rav Yehuda, who said that it takes 3 days for an animal to become muad. I'm not saying the halacha goes according to Rav Yehuda, because we already learned how Rav Yossi deals with it. What we're saying is in this particular inquiry, the fact that an animal becomes muad, we're saying let's go according to Rav Yehuda's preposition or proposition, that is 3 days to become muad. Since that is the case, what is the difference practically when the ox becomes a muad or the person who owns it becomes a muad? Kev, you falling asleep?
No, I'm listening.
Okay.
Just closing my eyes. Okay.
Me too. I'm closing my eyes and I'm listening.
Tired.
Guys, I'm trying here, please. What I'm saying is that there has to be a case where, in order to expect the owner of the animal to pay full damages, he's got to be aware of the situation. There has to be a balance between making the animal significantly dangerous and the person who owns it to be aware of the situation.
Okay.
That's what we've got to bear in mind. So when we say the person is muad, the person has to be aware in order to obligate them for culpability of full damages. So we're trying to see now, what is the practical application and what does this mean if an animal's muad or a person's muad? Fine. That being said, they inquired, are the 3 days that the Mishnah, i.e. Rabbi Yehuda, mentions, needed in order to make an ox muad or in order to make the person who owns it a muad? What's the practical difference between these two possibilities? The difference will be in a case when 3 sets of witnesses come to testify against the owner on one day. So, in other words, the ox gored other animals on 3 successive days, but the owner knew nothing about this occurrence, right? Until after the 3rd occurrence. And then all 3 sets of witnesses came to testify against the owner of the animal simultaneously in court. Right. You have the case so far?
Yep.
Fine. Now, what we've got to say is that if you needed the, if you say that 3 days are needed to make the ox a muad, then it becomes a muad in this case. Why? Because what we can say is this is a very clean situation. Over a period of a few weeks or a week or whatever the case may be, on 3 successive days, it doesn't have to be consecutive in a row, there was an incident with the ox, but the owner was out of town. Say the owner was in Australia, he came back, and now everybody wants to see him in court. Comes back to this headache, and all 3 appear and take the owner to court on one particular day. That's fine if you have to say that the ox becomes muad on 3 separate days, because the incidents occurred over 3 days. Where the problem comes is if you have to make the owner muad on 3 separate days, because here they're all coming to court in one time and warning him. So saying, listen, how can you make me muad for full payment? This is the first time I've ever heard of this incident. Okay, they're 3 in a row, but this for me is the first time I'm hearing about this. So why should I be liable to full payment? Now, this Gemara is going according to Rava, because the rabbis say on the 3rd incident, you are warned, and only when you commit the 4th incident that you're liable for full payment on muad. The reason why the Gemara goes according to Rava here is it's easier to have a case of Eidim, Zomemim, and certain other problems of the trial that are going to come up in theory, in scenario, when you are liable on the 3rd set of witnesses, because it's always easier to find 3 sets of conspiring witnesses than a fourth. Does that make sense? So for the practicality of the case rolled out, you could have 1 set of witnesses that testified about 3 separate incidents, or 3 separate sets of witnesses that testified against an incident each. So this is going according to Rav, according to Rashi. It said that the 3rd incident, you pay full damages. So if you say that the 3 days are needed in order to make an ox a muad, then it becomes a muad in this case. But if you say that 3 days are needed in order to make the person a muad, then he does not become a muad in this case, because he can surely claim it is only now that they are testifying against me. Meaning it's the first time he heard about this. Fine. What is the answer to this inquiry? The Gemara seeks to resolve it on the following basis. Come learn a proof from the following brisa. An ox does not become a muad until they testify it against in the presence of the owner and before the court. So in other words, if they testify against it before the court, but not in the presence of the owner, or in the presence of the owner but not before the court, it does not become a muad. That's what the brisa says. Until they testified against the court, before the court, and in the presence of the owner. So both factors have to be in existence. And how do they derive this? According to Tosfot, if you look at Exodus, Shmot, chapter 21, verse 29, and it was testified against the ox's owner, the verse continues, and he does not guard it, clearly indicating that his liability is for failure to guard the animal had he known to be muad. Okay, does that make sense? So it's, in other words, since he has not received all three warnings on the same day, since he has received all warnings on the same day, he's not sufficiently accustomed to the knowledge that his ox is agora. Rather, he must be warned on 3 separate days. That's if you want to make the person a muad and not the ox. So he's saying, listen, whether or not you want to make the ox a muad or a person a muad, it doesn't matter. The 2 criteria, according to Exodus, is A, the person has to be present, the ox's owner. Number 2, it has to occur before the court. And if either one of those factors don't occur, the animal does not become muad, even if you want to say the animal is muad, not the person. How do we say it's still about the animal becoming a muad, that it's created the event 3 times? Is because the definition of the muad is if the owner's warned. But when we say the animal is muad, it just means that the owner has to be warned once, not 3 times, for 3 separate incidents that the animal did. So that's the halachic distinction. Okay, very clear. Fine, we're going on. Now what we're going to bring is a subject about Eidim Zomemim. Is okay. So now we can foresee a problem. Let me just put the scenario forward. When's there a problem? So I say that one of the criteria is that a person has to be forewarned 3 times. Obviously, the animal does it 3 times. I mean, that's a given. But in addition to that, the owner has to be warned for each separate event on 3 separate days. Then we say it's very difficult to have a case of conspiring witnesses. Kevin, why do you think we'd have a problem having conspiring witnesses on separate days?
On separate days, because it's, I mean, it's more legitimate if it's all on the same day. If they're all on the same day, you say, is that gives it more legitimacy?
I'm saying as follows: is the Gemara is picking up a problem here. It's saying, all right, I understand that not only the animal creates the incident on 3 separate days, but the person has to be warned on 3 separate days to grow accustomed to it, so that he actually has to be cognizant of looking after that animal. Just like you brought up that good point from Mashir about the blessing for the rain, that it takes you a few days to accustom to, or that special parnosa brocha. Either one of those takes days to acclimatize. So he's saying that if you want to make the person muad as well as the ox, they have to be warned on 3 separate days. But if it's to say it's sufficient that the ox is muad, meaning on 3 separate days it does incidents, and all 3 sets of witnesses come before the owner in the presence of a court and say your animal did wrong, and now on the 3rd incident, according to Rava, the owner has to pay full damages. He's saying if you hold that the ox is muad and it's nothing to do with warning the person 3 times, but as long as the person is warned once and that the act is for the animal doing it 3 times, it's good. But then you've got a separate problem. And what's that problem that you just got to be aware of? Is that you've got a case of Eidim Zomemim. So what are Eidim Zomemim? It's conspiring witnesses, which means, say a couple of us get together and we want to make sure somebody pays a heavy penalty. Then we cook up an event where he pays Tam for the first 2 sets of witnesses, and the 3rd set of witnesses, according to Rava, that makes the animal muad, he pays full payment damages. Just remember the rest of the Rabbonim say it's only on the 4th incident that is liable for full damages. So when that's the case, we're saying it's much easier to occur when you say that just the animal is muad and the person doesn't have to be warned on 3 separate days, because it's easy to get 3 sets of witnesses together conspiring on one day. If you've got 3 sets of witnesses conspiring on different days, it's a much more difficult thing to prove. Why is it more difficult to prove, as we'll see in the Gemara? Because if you catch up the 3rd set of witnesses and you come back to me and you say to me, listen, I need to pay part of that muad payment because I was one of the conspiring witnesses that were involved in the 3 sets of witnesses, I could turn around to you if I was caught red-handed and say, all right, I did wrong, I conspired, but you can only obligate me to half payment damages because I conspired, I lied or whatever, I conspired for half payment damages because I never knew that other witnesses would come up on successive dates. How did I know? So it's difficult to prove. You could prove that I owe half damages, but it's certainly difficult to prove that I was conspiring with the other two sets of witnesses here. Because it's on separate days. That's why we say if a person also is muad and the owner has to be warned on 3 separate days, it's more difficult to get conspiring witnesses because they have to come on successive days. Whereas if you make the animal muad, and it's okay that the 3 separate sets of witnesses can testify against the animal's goring activity within one court session over 1 day. Does that make sense? In other words, 1 court session, first set of witnesses. 2nd court session, 2nd set of witnesses. 3rd court session, but it's all in 1 day. You could kind of realize that maybe they know each other. It's much easier to prove Eidim Zomemim when all you have to do is make the animal muat without the person being warned 3 times and the animal just creating the event 3 times. That's what we're going to come to deal with now. So I'm going to show you how it rolls out in the Gemara. Does it make sense what I'm saying, guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So how it starts off is as follows. If 2 witnesses testified against him concerning the first occurrence, and 2 different witnesses testified him concerning the second occurrence, and 2 different ones testified him concerning the third occurrence, we have 3 testimonies, but there are 1 testimony as regards to the hazama penalty. So let me just tell you what the hazama penalty actually is. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 19. And basically the Torah commands that Zomemim, which is conspiring witnesses, how are conspiring witnesses proved false? It's through a process called hazama, Kevin. So hazama is as follows, is that if you testify against me, right? And you said Damon did such and such at this place. And then it turned around and Arthur said, no, Kevin couldn't have been there to testify against you because he was with me in Ranana playing at the park. Then Kevin as a witness is cancelled out because he was seen by a different set of witnesses in a different place at the same time at which he accused seeing me and witnessing me create a particular offense. So hazama is a process where a second set of witnesses discredits the first set of witnesses. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the term.
Okay, so this is in Makot 5b. So guys, can you explain what I've just said?
I'm totally confused, but carry on.
So if
No, well, there's no point in
Gavin, do you want to try first?
confused.
No, you go for it, Kevin. Otherwise, I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
Tell me at what point you confused.
Bit lost. I get a lot on my mind at the moment, so I'm not absorbing much. So.
Can I say it in a nutshell? Maybe
I'll
for
watch
Arthur.
the video again. I'll watch the video again. It's not a problem. I'll watch it.
Arthur, Damon's trying. I think Damon, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm also a bit tired. So basically, there are 3 conspiring. There are 3 sets of witnesses. If they are conspiring, and there's false testimony that's proven to be false, that's called a hazama. Is that right?
No, but you are correct in one regard. You've got 2 valid points. Firstly, you need in Noahide law, non-Jewish courts, you only need 1 witness. In a Jewish court, you need 2 witnesses. It's much more fair because in a non-Jewish court, I'm talking in those days, I'm not talking modern days, is one person could accuse another. And who's to say who's right? You say, I did this, I say I didn't. It's 1 against 1. In a Jewish court, you would need 2 people. So 2 people is a safety mechanism that either that have to be conspiring against you, or it's very difficult to convict somebody, since you need two particular people to hold them guilty. So it's two against one. Otherwise, it's this person's opinion versus that person. So again, a legal case of witnesses against any Jew is two witnesses. Two witnesses. So what happens is you can have conspiring witnesses, where two of those witnesses are conspiring to convict the one particular person. Now, what's interesting is in the case of what happens if you have two witnesses and the one genuinely saw the incident and the other person has an instant dislike to you and ended up overhearing at a coffee bar the incident that the other one did and said, yeah, I witnessed it, and actually came to testify as a second party. Does that make sense? That's a slightly different case. But let's take the case of Eidim Zomemim. Two people falsely conspire to get a person to be punished by the court. So Eidim Zomemim are punished with whatever they intended to do to their apparent victim is done to them. So if they intended to put to death that person in a death penalty case, they are put to death. If they intended to have the person subjected to lashes, corporal punishment, they are given those lashes. If they intended to make the person pay a financial amount, they themselves have to pay that financial amount. That's the case of Eidim Zomemim in Makot 5b. But, and this is the big but, if they were successful in convicting the person, then they no longer have to pay the reciprocal payment of whatever it is. Why? Because Min Hashemayim, Hashem obviously wanted that to happen. So that's one reason. But the second reason is that reciprocal payment, whatever it is that they'd have to pay, is a punishment and a kindness from Hashem that they can pay it in this world. When they've actually convicted the person and they were cruel enough to abuse the court system and make a mockery of the Holy Torah and get a innocent person convicted, there is no mercy shown to them in the next world. They don't get the opportunity to pay for it in this world. Therefore, they pay the full wrath of the law in the next world. Meaning, if somebody gets the death penalty, it's a kapora if they use that opportunity of sincere teshuvah and regret to let that pay for the life that they've taken. So a life for a life, meaning they're giving their life up because they took somebody else's life, and that provides restitution. I'm not saying it makes up in full. We don't know. Only Hashem knows how it works. But it makes up for some of their crime by suffering the same punishment at which they did to others. So since they successfully were cruel enough to see another innocent person convicted and abuse the court system, that reciprocal punishment is not given to them because it's not, they're not allowed the mercy of suffering that punishment in this world. They're going to get the full wrath in the next world. That's the reason. And that's the reason. So the hazama is the way that you catch out conspiring witnesses, Eidim Zomemim. So how do you catch out conspiring witnesses? Is if those conspiring witnesses had other witnesses saying that whatever you're convicting this guy of this particular crime in Cape Town couldn't have occurred because you were having coffee with us in Johannesburg. Or to say, we saw you going to the movies at Santa. So how could you view this person doing this crime in Cape Town? So hazama is the process at which you disqualify conspiring witnesses by having another set of witnesses testify against them. That's what hazama is.
Can I ask a question?
How
are those other witnesses going to? Sorry, I've got something coming up. How those other witnesses going to appear? I mean, how are they even going to know that this case exists? How do they know that the witnesses are, what they're going to say? How do they know anything? I mean, obviously they saw him somewhere. They saw the witnesses, like you say, in a park somewhere else, so they couldn't have done it. But where would they come from?
All right. So this Gavin's asking a very good question. Now, when we started doing Sanhedrin with Simcha, Gavin and I were bugging him with this question often. So I'm going to give you the answer just to remind you what Simcha told you and what he's told me.
Thank you.
And this thing of it is, these are ideal cases in an ideal setting, in theory, meaning that they happen to hear about the case, they happen to be there at the right time to save the day and testify against the conspiring witnesses. How that works in practicality and if it works are two different things. What we're discussing is, as Rabbi Ron Cohen said, he said these are not necessarily legal cases. These are concepts of law that are played out in idyllic circumstances.
You see, they should actually, I understand that, and that's a good answer. Thank you. But a way around it, well, I mean, not a way around that, a practical way that would work is if they publish these cases so that the general public could actually review it.
They might. And one of the proofs of it is that they've got that red flag on horseback for death penalty cases. So believe me, believe me, they've got mechanisms, because the Sanhedrin's role is to make sure that they try and look for justice and find ways to make cases known. But, you know,
so they might have distributed pamphlets to people in the nearby area to see if there were any witnesses over and above, to, you know, whatever. I'm just saying they might have.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe the court process is that when you've got a set of witnesses that you have to cross-examine them in different rooms. That was one of the ways they did it.
Yes, no, that they would have done definitely, I'm sure, yeah.
And then sometimes if the story sounds too good, there's a problem.
Yeah.
Not if the story sounds bad, if it sounds too good, too perfect.
And
you know, and they'll catch him, just one sec, Kev, they'll catch him on little things like this is one of the things I remember in Sanhedrin is like, okay, so you viewed this person. What did you have for lunch that day? I had a cheese sandwich. Okay, who was with you? No one. Okay, where did you eat? Such and such. Then they take a mugshot, or they take the thing. Tell me, would you recognize the waitress? Because if you don't, your testimony is not accepted. No, I'd recognize her. Did he have a toasted cheese? No, he had a chicken mayonnaise. Well, you're lying about that. You obviously couldn't have been there. So they're not stupid. They take incidental facts around the case and they use it to enforce plausibility. Okay. And on a separate note, before we, I don't know.
I'm saying that. That part I understand. The part that I don't understand is where the third witnesses come from. But that's fine. You did explain it, that it's just theoretical more than anything else.
Okay, so this is the case. The reason the third witnesses are brought forward, and we talk about two sets of witnesses. Each case has to have two sets of witnesses. So there are three separate goring incidents, three separate cases. They're not one court case. Because if six witnesses come about one goring, it's one case.
So no. I was referring to the second witnesses coming against any of the other two to contradict them. It's fine. We've covered it. Thanks,
tell me what you're saying about Zomemim. Explain to me what Hazama.
No. I said it earlier. It's fine. No, you covered it very well. The fact that they cross-examine these guys and all of that to check them. I'm still saying there's still a problem with those second lot of witnesses coming. The witnesses that are contradicting these two guys. Let's just focus on the two guys. Those witnesses, you know, where do they come from? But you did say that it's more theoretical, so I understand that. It's fine, Dan. You covered it.
Okay, so listen, in answer to Gavin's question, which is good, is that obviously over hundreds of years of court systems, they developed a degree of sophistication to understand how to validate witnesses, and that process is covered in Makos and various commentaries on and of itself. If you look at both secular law and religious law, the court is a very sophisticated process in terms of vetting the quality of a witness. A witness can be thrown out for one of three reasons, just generally in law. Incompetence, meaning they contradict their own testimony, lack of clarity, conspiring, pre-prejudice, like when they've got a jury system, they do the same thing with witnesses. Does this particular witness, if he's part of the Ku Klux Klan and he's witnessed some black guy doing a armed robbery, you might say that he has a bias. All of these things are looked at. Could he have been there? Does, for example, is he myopic and needs glasses? Did he have his glasses on? How could he view the details correctly? Was it based purely on sound or vision? There are very sophisticated processes in terms of testimony of witnesses, cross-questioning of witnesses, separate vetting prior to court cases, etc. This is exactly what the job of a jury is and the job of a judge is to do, is to vet the quality of witnesses, because that's the very principle of what a case is based on. And that's why you have both the plaintiff and the defendant attorneys questioning each and every witness in every legal case. Yeah. That's exact. I mean, think about it. The case is, look at the length of a court case. If you remember this one where you had that South African case with the that crippled Oscar
Pistorius, yeah.
And how it went into his entire background, videos about his character, his nature, interviewing every witness there, cross-interviewing him, bringing the witness back later, saying, listen, the testimony 6 days later is different to your first testimony. It's a very sophisticated process. What the Gemara is thinking to do here is just lay out the principles. Is that how do you look at conspiring witnesses? Is if another set of witnesses come and say they couldn't have been witnessing this particular event because they were with us in a different place at that exact time. That's all Eidim Zomemim is coming to say, is to bring a principle forward.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Damon, so the Eidim Zomemim, just two parts. This might come across as funny. Do you think if there are 3 sets of witnesses, do they testify on each goring? The first, second, and third, or only on the third that it gored 3 times on each?
They each have to, it's 3 separate court cases.
Okay.
Or it could be 1 court case, but they're reporting on 3 separate incidents.
3 separate gorings. Okay, then do you think it's possible that some 2 sets of Eidim Zomemim have it in for another set of Eidim Zomemim and testify to get them into trouble? And they give a truthful testimony.
Okay. So
with that intention also?
Great question. Kevin's asking, what happens if you, let me just see if I understand this correctly.
Okay.
What happens if somebody's accusing Arthur of a crime and I'm his mate, but nobody knows in Israel I'm his mate because I live in South Africa. Okay. But I happen to know that I really like Arthur. So what I do is I make false testimony about Kevin's true statement against Arthur in order to discredit Kevin from being able to have testimony against Arthur. In other words, what Kevin might be asking here is what happens if those testifying against the Eidim Zomemim are themselves false witnesses, and the Eidim Zomemim are not false witnesses, and they're just made out to be false. Is that what you're asking?
So witnesses come in to testify to get the truth, to reveal the truth, and also to get rid of to prove that the Eidim Zomemim are guilty.
I don't know. Okay, explain your question. Let me understand it better.
The witnesses come in.
I thought you got it right.
Yeah.
Explain to me your question specifically. Maybe I didn't hear it in better.
So the witnesses come in if they know of certain Eidim Zomemim, maybe they've got a bad reputation and they're crooked. So 2 Eidim come in with the purpose of obviously testifying truthfully, but also with the intention of notifying the courts of the Eidim Zomemim, of the false testimony.
Okay, so what Kevin's asking is, in this case, they actually truthfully witnessed the event, but people that know these 2 characters know they're shady, and or is there character testimony to show that these two witnesses, even if they did happen to witness the event, are shady and you shouldn't believe them anyway? Is that what you're saying?
No, they're not. They're shady and they give false testimony, but two other witnesses know that they're shady characters and they catch them out. They give testimony they testify against these two false witnesses and they give the truthful account of what happened.
They don't even have to give it a truthful account of what happened. According to Hazama, they only have to show that these two false witnesses were not in the place where they say they viewed the crime. They don't even have to be there to have viewed the crime. It's a very simple case where I turn around and I say, listen, I wasn't there at this event. Whatever these people say they witnessed, these two people, they couldn't have, in fact, viewed this particular crime because I was serving them sandwiches at Chuck's Bar and Grill. Meaning, I don't know what Eidim, I don't know what crime took place. All I know is that they were eating sandwiches at my bar and I was having the waitress serve them and I gave them the bill. They couldn't have been there. That's the only thing that the Hazama process has to do, is to prove that those conspiring witnesses couldn't have been there to witness such an event if they were in another place. That's how they get discredited. You don't even have to say this is what really happened. What Kevin's asking is a different question. You could have another set of witnesses that say, this set of witnesses isn't telling the truth because the event that we witnessed as another set of witnesses, the event didn't quite play out like this. So then that one set of witnesses could be Eidim Zomemim, but then that other set, how do you know which set of witnesses is correct? Because each could be lying. That's a complicated process. Do they cancel each other out, or do we believe the one set of witnesses about other than the other? As far as I know, if you had two sets of witnesses that are conflictory in statement, the case would obviously, if there were full sets, probably like two sets of two be thrown out because it would be contradictory information. So it would be a problem. I think you'd have to have another set that would collaborate with one of the sets to at least have one clean set of witnesses that if the two cancel each other out, you'd have a third set that was clean.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, but we're going off topic. What we're trying to determine here now is just how do actually what Hazama means, and the fact that what we're trying to learn in this case is that about Eidim Zomemim with regard to a muad ox. And all we're saying is if it occurs where you say that the person has to be muad in addition to the ox, where the person has to be warned on 3 separate days, it's much more difficult to have conspiring witnesses because you could come to the first or second set of witnesses and say to them, listen, but you have to share in the muad payment of the third set of conspiring witnesses. And even if the first two sets were also conspiring, they could turn around and say, yes, we conspired to make him pay half damages. We didn't know that there'd be a third set of conspiring witnesses. That has nothing to do with us because that wasn't a separate day. The only thing that we could guarantee is that we wanted him to have half payment damages and we conspired. But you can only make us pay for those half payment damages at which we conspired that person to pay because we didn't know on subsequent days there'd be witnesses. If, however, you say the ox is muad, which means all 3 sets of witnesses can come on one day, you could turn around to the Eidim Zomemim and say, listen, you were all at the court on the same day. Something's fishy here. It's very possible that if the animal's found to be muad by the third set of witnesses and you're all found to be conspiring, that you have to share in that full muad payment because you signaled to each other. You collaborated with each other. And that's what we're saying. It's much more difficult to prove Eidim Zomemim if you have to make the person muad as well as the animal. That's what we're saying. We're going to see how the case unfolds. I know Kevin's tired. I know Arthur, quite rightly so, has got a lot of worry at the moment. And Arthur, it's not nice to have somebody invasively break into something that you hold as secure. Really, it's not a nice feeling. But just all I'm saying is thank Hashem, it wasn't a larger amount because that would have certainly added to the misery. Honestly.
Oh, and on Friday they stole my bike seat.
But just to let you know, Arthur, just to put you on a sort of a better note, is when you get divorced, that's an invasion of all your property.
No, that's basically it's like a hurricane. They come
Yeah,
in
my
hot.
ex-wife's got all my
No.
furniture and all my property. And
Well,
everything.
it has to be clean. Another joke. It has to be clean in a
Okay.
shoe.
Okay, but it's 47 minutes. You noticed that, Dames?
Yeah, I know.
Damon, listen.
We have
Damon,
40
actually,
minutes.
I've
What,
got a
you
serious
bought it?
question. Sorry.
No, I didn't. I came since the week.
Damon, listen, I've got a serious question. Bottom line, what does the Torah follow? Does the person have to be mu'ad or the animal mu'ad? Because I think the person has to be mu'ad.
Okay, so you know what there is merit for both. Firstly, from a biblical point of view, it's saying that let me just give you a source for where. Just give me 1 second. Let me just hang on a second. I'm going to give you a source here. Hang on. Look, according to Tosfot, okay, you're actually correct that the person would have to be muad, because unless the person is muad, it says in Exodus chapter 21, verse 29, unless the owner is apprised of his muad actions in a way that enables him to guard it from committing future attacks, the Torah considers him forewarned. But if he's not appraised to the extent that he can make remedy action, he's not considered forewarned.
Okay.
Which means, exactly as Gavin said, that to a certain extent, if a person is muad, firstly, it would remove the category of Eidim Zomemim, because you would need 3 separate days to warn him. So it's very difficult to have a conspiring set of witnesses.
Okay.
And the second thing of it is the Torah can only expect him to make full payment if the owner is aware of each occurrence. How do you come to him on one day with 3, and he comes back from holiday and his animals created 3 different damages? And according to Rava, on the 3rd incident, you make him liable for the 3rd incident of full damages and the first 2 of half damages. Why are you making him liable for the 3rd set? Because, he came home from holiday, he heard from nothing, and now he's in court. And now all of a sudden he had no way to remedy the situation by guarding his animal extra vigilantly. So Gavin's got a good point. Very good point.
Yeah, I just think it's much safer and it's much better.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to see how this case of Eidim Zomemim rolls out next time. But I hope this shiur was much more of a conversation and it flowed. And I hope it just made more sense than just reading it just straight from the text.
Gavin, can you just explain what your good point that you just give it to me? I switched off for a minute there. Just repeat it. What Damon just reinforced.
No. I'm saying that I prefer what's it Tosfot, eh?
Okay, yeah. Which is?
Yeah. I prefer Tosfot's opinion, which is that rather that the person is muad as opposed to the animal being muad, because it prevents the
I heard that.
The Eidim Zomemim from conspiring. So it just gives extra protection to the owner.
Okay, very good point.